4 black girls disappeared in 2003. Then 13 years later, one sent a message from a new account claiming simply, "They lied about what happened to us." And with those 7 words, Denise Carter's life, and a case she thought she understood, began to unravel. It was a late summer evening in 2016, the kind that felt too warm for the date on the calendar. Denise sat hunched over her desk in the cramped newsroom of the Metro Post, the hum of the aging fluorescent lights matching the dull ache behind her eyes. She had been covering City Hall meetings for months, chasing down zoning disputes and budget shortfalls, the kind of work that paid the bills but didn't stir the blood. When the notification pinged on her laptop, she almost ignored it. The account name was unfamiliar, the profile picture a blank gray silhouette. She clicked anyway. The message was short, typed without punctuation, the kind of thing you'd expect from someone in a hurry or in hiding. They lied about what happened to us. Underneath, a single photo loaded slowly, the pixels resolving into an image of a bare motel room. Cheap floral bedspread, peeling wallpaper, a rusted lamp tipped slightly to the side. It could have been anywhere. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard, but curiosity and habit drove her to check the sender's profile. The account was only a day old, with no friends, no posts, nothing but that one message. The only personal detail, a birth date in 1988. That would make the sender about 28. The same age the girls who disappeared in 2003 would be now. Denise's heart gave a slow, deliberate thud. She knew the case. Everyone in East Street Louis knew the case. 4 girls, all black, all friends from the same neighborhood, had vanished one hot July night after leaving a block party on Mississippi Avenue. They had been seen walking together down 15th Street, talking and laughing, their voices carrying into the sticky night air. No one ever saw them again. The investigation had been fast at first. Police questioned neighbors, canvassed the block, and interviewed partygoers. Rumors swirled that they'd been caught in gang crossfire, that they'd run away, that they'd been taken over the river into St. Louis proper. But no bodies were found. Within a year, the case had cooled. Eventually, the city folded their names into a list of the lost. Kids who vanished into statistics. The case had always bothered Denise, even back when she was a cub reporter straight out of college. She'd pitched a follow-up in 2008, but her editor shut it down. No new leads, no new story. And so the file sat in the paper's archives, the girls frozen in their yearbook photos, 4 young faces trapped in a perpetual summer night. Now, staring at this strange message, Denise felt the old frustration mix with something sharper, a pulse of adrenaline. Whoever sent it knew something, or at least wanted her to think they did. And the choice of words, "they lied," meant the deception wasn't just about the events. It hinted at a cover-up, at people in power actively distorting the truth. She tried the obvious first. She typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. The 3 little dots that signal typing never appeared. She tried again. "Are you one of the girls?" "Which one?" Nothing. She saved the photo to her hard drive, zooming in on every corner. The bedspread was patterned with faded pink and green flowers, the kind you could find in almost any budget motel across the Midwest. But in the top right corner of the image, half hidden by the frame of the photo, was a small blue sticker. The kind motels use to mark housekeeping schedules. It had a number written in Sharpie. 14. Room number, she thought. The newsroom around her felt suddenly too small, too noisy, even though only 2 other reporters were still working. She grabbed her notebook and started flipping through the mental Rolodex of sources she'd built over the years. If the room was part of an active motel, someone might recognize the furniture, the pattern on the walls, maybe even the sticker system. But before she could start making calls, a thought stopped her cold. The birth year on the account, 1988. That would make the sender the same age as Kiana Morris, the youngest of the missing girls, who had just turned 15 when she vanished. Kiana had been the quiet one, the one whose smile never quite reached her eyes in the yearbook photo. Denise remembered interviewing her mother once, years ago. A woman so hollowed out by grief, she'd spoken as if Kiana were still just late coming home. Denise leaned back in her chair. If this was a hoax, it was a cruel one. But if it wasn't, someone had been alive all this time, watching from the shadows. She decided to run a quick search on the IP address behind the message. It wasn't something the average Facebook user could do, but Denise had learned a few digital tricks in the years since the girls disappeared. What came back was strange. The location wasn't in East Street, Lewis, or even across the river. It was a tiny town she'd never heard of, 2 hours away. She jotted the name down in her notebook, the letters looking foreign on the page: Mill Creek. Population just over 900. 1 gas station, 1 diner, a scattering of homes, and, according to a quick search, 2 motels. She stared again at the photo. Room 14. The Metro Post's air conditioning kicked on, rattling in the ceiling, and Denise realized she had been holding her breath. Her pulse was steady, but her mind was moving faster now, lining up questions like dominoes. Why send the message now? Why her? And if the sender was really one of the missing girls, what had happened in the 13 years between that July night and this moment? She closed her laptop, slipped it into her bag, and grabbed her keys. There was no point calling ahead. If the sender had gone silent once, they could vanish again. And she wasn't going to give them that chance. As she stepped out into the humid night air, the city's streetlights painted the sidewalk in alternating pools of orange and shadow. Somewhere far away, a freight train moaned, the sound stretching over the rooftops like a warning. Denise didn't know it yet, but this drive to Mill Creek would be the first step into a maze. One built not of brick and mortar, but of secrets, cowardice, and a truth so deliberately buried that digging it up would put her in the crosshairs of people who had once been considered untouchable. The road ahead was quiet, but her thoughts were not. She kept replaying those 7 words, hearing them in a voice she couldn't quite place. They lied about what happened to us. By the time she reached the highway, she was already thinking of the case file, the interviews, the overlooked leads. The girls' names moved through her head like a litany. Aaliyah Jones, Shanice Ford, Tamara Green, Kiana Morris. 4 girls who had been reduced to missing posters and unanswered questions. And now, possibly, one voice breaking the silence. Somewhere out there, Denise thought, the truth was waiting. And someone had just invited her to come and find it. The drive to Mill Creek took Denise through a slow fade of city sprawl into flat, unbroken farmland. The hum of her tires on the asphalt became a kind of low, constant drumbeat beneath her thoughts. She kept her eyes on the road, but her mind was working its own back alleys, tracing names, dates, faces. The missing girls were no longer a story in the archives. They were standing right beside her in that car, silent, waiting for her to find them. Mill Creek announced itself without ceremony. A weather-beaten wooden sign, its paint peeling into splinters, stood crooked at the side of the road. Mill Creek. Welcome home. Below it, a hand-painted notice advertised the annual church picnic. The downtown was just 2 intersecting streets, lined with shuttered shops and a single diner with a flickering neon coffee cup. The place had the stillness of a town that had been holding its breath for years. Denise pulled into the lot of the first motel, a squat L-shaped building with sun-faded siding and a gravel drive. The sign out front read, "The Willow Inn," in faded blue letters. She counted the doors as she walked along the corridor. Room 14 sat at the far end, a dent in the door like someone had kicked it years ago, and no one bothered to fix it. She stepped into the lobby, greeted by the faint smell of mildew and old coffee. Behind the counter, a man in his 60s looked up from a local newspaper. His eyes narrowed slightly, the way small-town people often do when they see an unfamiliar face. "Afternoon," Denise said, flashing her press badge in a casual motion that was deliberate enough to get his attention. "I'm looking into some motel photos that surfaced online. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions?" He eyed the badge, then her. "Depends who's asking." She repeated her name, adding, "Metro Post, St. Louis." The title carried a little weight out here. Big city paper, big city stories. He scratched his chin. "We don't get much trouble out here. What's this about?" Denise pulled up the motel room photo on her phone, holding it out so the blue sticker with the number 14 was visible. "This room looked familiar." He frowned, leaning forward. "That's ours. Or it was. Wallpaper's different now. And that bedspread's been gone. Shoot, maybe 10 years. Used to be in the old rooms before the renovation." Her pulse jumped. "So this could have been taken here, room 14? He nodded reluctantly. "Could have. Why?" Denise didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "Do you keep guest records that far back?" The man let out a short laugh, half amused, half dismissive. "Not from 10 years ago. Paper records from back then got tossed when we switched to computers. You're talking about ancient history." Ancient history. 13 years ago wasn't ancient, not to the families who'd been counting the days since 2003. "What about the staff? Anyone still here from that time?" she pressed. The man considered, then nodded toward the parking lot. "Marla. She does the cleaning. Been here since before I bought the place. But I don't know what she'd remember." Denise thanked him and stepped outside. A thin woman in a faded housekeeping smock was pushing a cart down the walkway. Her hair was tied back in a rough bun, and she had the air of someone who didn't expect to be interrupted. "Marla," Denise called gently. The woman paused, eyeing her with caution. "Yes?" Denise introduced herself and showed the same photo. Marla's eyes lingered on the bedspread for a beat too long. "Yeah," she said finally. "That was ours. Room 14. We used to get some odd guests in there. Man kept to himself, always paid in cash. Came around a few times a year." "Do you remember his name?" Marla shook her head. "Never gave one, just signed M. Hall on the slip. Could have been fake for all I know. But he always had a girl with him. Young, too young, quiet." Denise's stomach tightened. One girl or more? Marla hesitated, then said, "Different ones. Not many, but yeah, different. And they never came to the lobby with him. He'd go get the ice himself, kept the do not disturb up the whole time." Denise kept her voice level. "Did you ever tell the police?" Marla's gaze darted toward the office, then back. "Once. Years ago. They came, asked a couple questions, left. Nothing happened. After that, I stopped asking questions. You work here long enough, you learn who you can talk about and who you can't." The words sat heavy between them. Denise knew that tone. The flat finality of someone who'd brushed up against something dangerous and decided to step back. She thanked Marla and slipped her card into the woman's pocket. "If you remember anything else, call me. Anytime." Back in her car, Denise checked the second motel on her list. The Pine Hollow Lodge was smaller, its sign barely lit, but its layout was similar. No room 14. The rooms only went up to 10. She drove past anyway, scanning the parking lot for anything that felt off. Nothing. It was past 7 when she pulled into the lot of the Mill Creek Diner. The place was half full, the low murmur of conversations blending with the clink of cutlery. She took a booth near the window and ordered coffee. She needed time to process. The motel photo was real. The room was real. And someone had stayed there with a young girl, possibly more than one, years ago. That was the link. But it was the other detail, the one Marla had let slip without realizing, that lodged in Denise's mind. Different girls. That meant turnover. That meant movement. And that meant there was a chance the missing girls had been here. She pulled out her notebook, flipping to the page with the girls' names. She wrote M. Hall in the margin, underlining it twice. Fake name or not, it was something. Her phone buzzed. A new message from the same blank account. This one had no text, just another photo. Denise opened it slowly, her breath catching. It was a close-up of a hand, dark-skinned, slender, holding a crumpled flyer. The flyer was for a neighborhood vigil dated August 2003, with all 4 missing girls' faces printed at the bottom. And on the top of the flyer, scrawled in messy black marker, were the words, "We saw you. You didn't help." The words burned in her mind. Whoever this was, they weren't just pointing to the truth. They were accusing someone. And Denise had the sinking feeling she was about to find out who. The words on that flyer followed Denise out of the diner like a shadow. "We saw you. You didn't help." By the time she slid behind the wheel of her car, the sun had dropped behind the fields, leaving Mill Creek under a sheet of dusky blue. Street lamps flickered on one by one, stretching long, thin shadows across the empty streets. She could feel the quiet pressing in, the kind of quiet that wasn't peace, but concealment. She decided she couldn't chase this from behind a screen anymore. She needed boots on the ground, names on paper, and faces in front of her. If M. Hall had been using motels in Mill Creek, someone outside the Willow Inn had to have noticed. Small towns noticed everything. They just didn't always talk. Denise's first stop was back inside the diner. The waitress who'd served her coffee earlier, a woman in her late 40s with wiry arms and a no-nonsense expression, was wiping down the counter. Denise approached slowly, laying a $5 bill on the counter. "Quick question," Denise said, keeping her voice conversational. "You been in Mill Creek long?" "All my life," the woman said, eyes narrowing just slightly. "You remember a man, Monsieur Hall, tall, pale, always had a young girl with him, paid in cash, stayed out by the Willow Inn." The woman froze mid-wipe. Denise leaned in just enough to make it private. "I'm not here to cause trouble, but I think one of those girls might still be alive. 13 years missing. This is about them." The waitress's mouth tightened. She glanced at the clock on the wall, then toward the back door. "I can't talk here. Meet me by the gas station after my shift. Half an hour." The gas station was lit by a single, buzzing fluorescent tube. Denise waited by her car, the hum of crickets loud in the stillness. When the waitress arrived, she was out of uniform, wearing a plain hoodie and jeans. "Name's Carla," she said quickly. "And yeah, I remember him. Came in here a few times late at night. Always with a girl. Not the same one either. One of them." She hesitated. "One of them looked scared out of her mind, wouldn't look at anyone. I tried to make small talk and Hall cut me off, said she was shy, but it wasn't shyness I saw." "Did you ever see any of the girls again?" Denise asked. Carla shook her head. "Number and I didn't push it. Around here, you ask the wrong questions. You end up with the wrong kind of attention. His brother's on the city council, or was. That family's been here forever. Folks look the other way." There it was again, the shadow of power, the implied threat. The same thread she'd heard from Marla. Denise felt the pieces begin to click into place. The disappearances, the lack of police follow-up, the family names smoothing over any noise. Back in her motel room, not the Willow Inn, but a small, cleaner place on the edge of town, Denise opened her laptop and began searching public records. It didn't take long to find him. Marcus Hall Sr., former Mill Creek City Councilman. Served from 1998 to 2007. Stepped down citing health reasons. But local coverage hinted at rumors. An ethics complaint quietly dismissed. Whispers about personal conduct. She dug deeper, scrolling through old campaign photos, and there it was. A younger man in the background of one shot, standing just behind the councilman at a ribbon cutting. Tall, pale, dark hair. M. Hall Jr., presumably. The resemblance between them was unmistakable. A chill ran through her. She thought of Marla's story about the girls in room 14, Carla's account of the scared young woman, the flyer photo, and now a family name tied to local power. Denise called an old contact, a retired saint, Clare County detective named Frank Dolan, who'd tipped her off on a different case years ago. She laid out what she had. There was a long silence on the other end before Dolan finally spoke. "I shouldn't be telling you this," he said. "Back in 2003, we got an anonymous tip about a white male in Mill Creek keeping underage black girls in a rental house. Description fit your guy to a T. I drove out there myself. Place looked lived in but empty. My sergeant told me to drop it. Said it was already handled at the local level." "Handled how?" Denise pressed. "That's the thing," Dolan said. "No arrests. No follow-up, just gone from the board. I asked once more and got pulled off missing persons the next week. Figured someone upstairs didn't want it touched." Denise's stomach knotted. She'd covered corruption before, but this was different. This wasn't about money changing hands. It was about lives being erased. The next morning, Denise drove to the address Dolan gave her. The house sat on the far edge of town, half hidden by overgrown trees. The windows were boarded, the porch sagging under years of neglect. A faded "for sale" sign leaned against the front steps. The door was locked, but the back porch gave way with a firm push. Inside, the air was stale and heavy. Dust clung to every surface. The living room walls were bare, except for faint outlines where picture frames once hung. She moved carefully, her footsteps muffled on the worn carpet. In the kitchen, a cabinet door hung loose, revealing a small hidden compartment behind the shelves. Inside was nothing but a single Polaroid photograph, the edges curled with age. It showed a girl sitting on the edge of a bed, knees pulled to her chest. Her face was half hidden by her hair, but Denise knew that face from the old case file. Aaliyah Jones, oldest of the 4 missing girls. And at the bottom of the Polaroid, in the same messy handwriting from the flyer, were 3 words: "I was here." Denise sat on the kitchen floor, the photo trembling slightly in her hands. Aaliyah had been alive long after 2003, which meant the official story, the gang violence theory, was worse than a mistake. It was a lie. Someone had decided these girls' lives were disposable. Someone had made sure no one came looking too hard. And now, 13 years later, one of them was sending breadcrumbs, pulling Denise towards something the town still didn't want unearthed. She took a slow breath. She'd been a reporter long enough to know that this was the moment you either stepped back or stepped all the way in, and she was already in. She slid the Polaroid into her notebook, stood, and headed for the door. Her next stop would be public property records, to see exactly who had owned this house and whether M. Hall had ever been foolish enough to put his name on paper. But as she reached her car, she noticed something that made her pause. A single folded piece of paper was tucked under her windshield wiper. She unfolded it slowly. Inside was a grainy printout of a photograph, her from the night before, sitting in the diner booth, coffee cup in hand. On the back, in the same sharp black scrawl, "You're looking in the wrong place." The note felt heavier than paper should. Denise stood by her car in the dim light of the Mill Creek morning, her fingers tightening on the edges until they creased. "You're looking in the wrong place." Her first instinct was to scan the street. A pickup rolled past slowly, the driver's face half hidden behind a ball cap. A curtain in the second-story window of the diner's apartments twitched. The whole town felt like it had tilted toward her, eyes narrowing, watching to see what she'd do next. She slid into her car, locked the doors, and laid the note on the passenger seat. The photograph, grainy, zoomed in from a distance, gnawed at her. Someone had been inside the diner last night or close enough to the window to snap that shot without her noticing. That meant they'd either been there before she arrived, waiting, or had followed her in. Whoever it was knew her movements, and now they were letting her know it. She took a deep breath, running her fingers along the steering wheel. This was the moment most people would back off. She could feel the edge of it, that cold drop in the stomach when you realize you're being noticed by the wrong kind of people. But she wasn't going to back off, not when the pieces were starting to connect. The wrong place line kept looping in her mind. It could mean two things. Either she was on the wrong trail entirely, or she was close enough to the truth that they wanted to nudge her off course. And there was another possibility, the one she couldn't ignore. What if the message didn't come from someone protecting Hall? What if it came from the survivor? If someone wanted her to think she was in the wrong place, she'd test the theory. Denise drove to the Mill Creek Public Library, a low brick building on Main Street. The parking lot was empty except for a single rusted bike chained to a lamppost. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper and lemon cleaner. A middle-aged librarian looked up from behind the desk. Denise smiled politely and went straight to the public computer terminals. She pulled up the county's property records, typing in the address of the boarded-up house. The ownership history loaded slowly, the sluggish internet matching the pace of the town. There it was, deeded to Marcus Hall Sr. from 1995 until 2004, then transferred to Hall Investments LLC, a shell company registered to a P.O. box in St. Louis. The change happened after the girls vanished. Her pen scratched across the page of her notebook. The councilman had owned the house when the girls were taken, then moved it to a company name as soon as the case went cold. She cross-referenced other properties owned by Hall Investments. 3 addresses popped up, all small-town rentals within an hour's drive of East Street. Louis. She copied them down. Denise had just closed her notebook when a shadow fell across the computer screen. She turned to see a man standing a little too close, mid-40s, sun-creased skin, wearing a sheriff's department jacket. "You're not from around here," he said flatly. "No," Denise replied, her voice even. "Just doing some research." He glanced at her notebook. "Lot of questions for a stranger." She met his gaze. "Lot of missing girls for a small county." The pause stretched. His jaw worked, then he leaned down slightly. "Friendly advice. Folks here don't like outsiders digging into old business. Best you head back to the city before you get yourself hurt." He straightened, gave her one last unreadable look, and walked out. Denise sat still for a moment, letting her heart rate settle. Threats in small towns came wrapped in politeness, but the meaning was always clear. If the message on her car came from the survivor, then the survivor was moving carefully, close enough to watch, far enough to stay safe. That meant she might be nearby. Denise pulled out her phone and opened the blank account's profile again. Still no new posts, no replies. She sent one more message. "If I'm in the wrong place, tell me where the right one is." She didn't expect a response. But less than a minute later, the 3 dots appeared. Her breath caught. "Stop looking at Hall's house. Look under the willow." The dots vanished. The account went offline. Denise didn't waste time. The Willow Inn sat quiet under the mid-morning sun, the paint looking more tired in daylight. She parked at the far end and walked the perimeter. The willow was literal. A large drooping willow tree in the back lot, its curtain of leaves swaying in the breeze. She ducked under the branches, the sunlight dimming as the leaves closed around her. The ground here was uneven. Roots bulged under the soil like knotted veins. She circled the trunk until she saw it, a patch where the dirt looked freshly disturbed. She crouched, pushing aside the loose soil with her hands. A glint caught her eye. A small metal box, the size of a shoe box, half buried. She pulled it free, her palms streaked with dirt. Inside was a stack of photographs bound with a rubber band. She slid the top one free and felt her throat tighten. It showed all 4 missing girls sitting on the edge of a bed, the same cheap floral bedspread from room 14. But this time they were smiling weakly, as if coaxed. A shadow loomed in the doorway behind them. The next photo showed only 3 girls, the next 2. By the final photograph, only one girl remained. Kiana Morris staring straight at the camera, eyes flat. At the bottom of the box was a folded piece of paper. She opened it carefully. It was a motel receipt from 2005, signed in a neat hand, M. Hall. The dates lined up, 2 years after the girls had disappeared. Denise's mind was racing. The survivor was guiding her, showing her proof that the girls had been alive long after the case was declared cold. That meant the official story had been buried under deliberate lies. But if the survivor was willing to take this risk, why not come forward entirely? Fear. The same fear that had kept the town quiet, the same fear that had kept the waitress and the housekeeper from speaking out. She slipped the photos and receipt back into the box, tucking it into her bag. She would need to get these to someone outside the local chain of command, someone who couldn't be leaned on. As she walked back to her car, she caught sight of a reflection in the motel's office window. A dark sedan idling across the street. She didn't recognize it from anywhere else in town. She got into her car, started it, and pulled away slowly, checking her mirror. The sedan waited a beat, then slid into motion behind her. Her pulse kicked. She took a right turn, then another, weaving through side streets. The sedan stayed with her. Finally, she turned into the empty lot behind an abandoned feed store, cutting the engine. She watched in the mirror as the sedan rolled past slowly, the driver hidden by glare. It didn't circle back. Denise sat in the stillness of the lot, the weight of the box in her bag like a live current. She had enough now to force the case open, but not without risking exposure. And exposure in Mill Creek meant more than bad press. She thought of the flyer. "We saw you. You didn't help." Whoever had written that had lived through this, had carried the memory for 13 years. If she failed now, she'd be just another person on their list. She started the car and pointed it toward the highway. It was time to leave Mill Creek, and for now, and bring what she had to someone who couldn't be silenced. But she knew she'd be back, because she wasn't in the wrong place anymore. She was exactly where they didn't want her to be. Denise didn't stop driving until Mill Creek was a shrinking memory in her rearview mirror. The weight of the metal box on the passenger seat felt almost physical, like an anchor holding her to the last 48 hours. She kept glancing at it, as if half expecting the lid to spring open and spill its contents into the car. The photographs, the receipt, the undeniable proof that the official story of the 4 missing girls was a lie. Her destination was clear: a small windowless office on the 4th floor of the St. Louis courthouse. It belonged to Paul Navarro, a county investigator she'd worked with on a public corruption piece 3 years ago. Navarro was old school, chain-smoking, always 2 steps ahead of the game, and immune to the kind of political pressure that had shut down cases like this before. She called ahead, keeping her voice low. "I've got something. 4 missing girls, East Street, Louis, 2003. I'm bringing proof." Navarro didn't waste words. "Get here now." When she walked into his office, Navarro was standing by the window, a cigarette burning in the ashtray beside him. He took one look at her expression and locked the door. "Let's see it." Denise set the metal box on his desk, flipping the latch open. She laid the photos out in sequence. 4 girls on the bed, then 3, then 2, then 1. She watched his jaw tighten as the images moved toward their grim conclusion. "Jesus," he muttered, tapping the first picture. "This is after they went missing." 2 years after, Denise said, sliding the motel receipt toward him. "Dated 2005. Same bedspread, same room number. Signed by M. Hall." Navarro picked up the receipt, his brow furrowing. If this is legit, it blows the original timeline apart, means someone kept them alive, at least some of them, for years. And that someone had enough juice to make the cops back off. "That's not all," Denise said. "The property where at least one of them was held? Owned by the councilman, Marcus Hall Sr., the one who just happened to step down in 2007. Navarro gave a humorless laugh. "That explains a lot." He started stacking the photos to slide them back into the box when he froze, eyes narrowing at the first image, the one with all 4 girls on the bed. "Hold on," he said, reaching for a magnifier from his desk drawer. He held the lens over the top corner of the photo just above the bedspread. "What is it?" Denise asked. "Right here behind them," he said, pointing. "You see that?" She leaned in. At first, it looked like part of the wall, a faint shadow near the headboard, but under magnification, it resolved into something else. A man's reflection, faint but visible in a small square mirror on the wall. His face was partially obscured, but one detail was clear: the badge-shaped outline pinned to his shirt. "That's not Hall," Navarro said slowly. "That's a uniform." Denise felt a cold weight settle in her chest. "Police?" Navarro nodded grimly. "Looks like a badge. If this is real, that means at least one cop was in that room while those girls were there." The thought was like an electric shock. All the warnings, the sudden dead ends, the reluctance of witnesses to speak. It hadn't just been Hall's family pulling strings. This reached inside the department. "You think this explains why the tip Dolan got went nowhere?" she asked. Navarro sat back, exhaling smoke toward the ceiling. "It explains everything. If one of their own was in on it, there's no way a small-town PD or even county would go against it. They'd bury it so deep you'd never find it." Denise's mind was racing. She thought about the message from the survivor. "Look under the willow." Whoever she was, she had just pointed Denise toward evidence that didn't just implicate one man, but an entire protection network. Navarro's eyes hardened. If a cop was involved, you can't go back to Mill Creek alone. Hell, you shouldn't go back at all without backup, and not local backup. Outside jurisdiction. "I'm not stopping," Denise said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but you need to understand. This just turned from a dangerous story to a deadly one. People don't kill reporters over zoning scandals. They kill them over this." Navarro called in a favor from a forensic photo analyst he trusted. Within the hour, they had a preliminary read. The image was genuine, no digital tampering. The timestamp embedded in the Polaroid's chemical aging matched the mid-2000s. "It's real," Navarro said, handing the photo back. "That's a cop's badge, and that's your leverage. With this, you could blow the whole thing open, if you can survive long enough to publish." As Denise left Navarro's office, her phone buzzed. Another message from the blank account. "You're getting close. But if you print before I say, they'll kill me." No photo this time, just the words. Her grip tightened on the phone. The survivor wasn't just feeding her clues, she was controlling the pace. That meant she still had more to reveal, and whatever it was, it would be worse than what they'd found so far. Driving back toward her apartment, Denise thought about the timeline. The girls vanish in 2003. At least one is alive in 2005. Photos suggest they were moved, possibly between multiple Hall-owned properties. And in at least one instance, a man in a police uniform is physically present. It was no longer just a story about 4 missing girls. It was about systemic protection, a pipeline of silence. And now Denise was standing in the middle of it, with proof in her hands. The question wasn't whether she could break the story. It was whether she could do it without ending up as another name on a cold case file. The message from the survivor didn't include a location, only a time. Tomorrow. 10 p.m. Denise stared at it for a long moment, her instincts pulling in 2 directions. Meeting a source who was this careful, someone who had survived whatever happened in those missing years, meant she might finally hear the truth in their own words, but it also meant walking directly into a situation she couldn't control. She typed a single reply. "Where?" The answer came 10 minutes later. "Bus station, Collinsville. Back bench. Alone." The next night, the bus station was nearly empty. It was the kind of place where time seemed to stop between arrivals. A lone vending machine buzzing in the corner, the distant hum of fluorescent lights. Denise arrived early, choosing a spot near the ticket counter where she could watch the back bench without being obvious. At 10:07, she saw her. A woman in her late 20s, hood pulled low, moved in from the side entrance. Her stride was quick but hesitant, like someone used to scanning for exits. She sat on the back bench, hands stuffed into the front pocket of her sweatshirt. Denise walked over slowly, stopping a few feet away. Kiana? The woman's head turned slightly. Under the hood, her eyes were sharp, searching. "Don't say my name here." Denise sat, her pulse steadying into focus. "You sent me the photos, the note." The woman didn't deny it. Instead, she looked straight ahead at the empty bay where buses should have been idling. "They'll kill me if they know I talked to you." "I can protect your identity," Denise said, "but I need to understand. Why now? Why after all these years?" The woman's voice was low, but each word carried weight. "Because I'm dying." Denise turned to look at her fully. "They told me if I left, they'd come after me, that nobody would believe me. For years I believed them. But I've been sick for months. Doctors say it's not going away, so now I don't care if they find me. I'm not letting them bury the others without the truth." Denise's breath caught. "The others?" Kiana shook her head. "They're gone. I don't know where they buried them. I was the last one they kept, the one they thought they could turn." Denise leaned forward. "Turn you into what?" Kiana's gaze was cold now, unflinching. "One of them. Not for Hall. For the badge." The air seemed to drop 10 degrees. "It wasn't just Hall," Kiana continued. "He was the front. The man who really ran it wore a uniform. He was there the night we were taken. He'd come by every few weeks checking on us, making sure we knew who was in charge. He told me I could earn my way out, help them bring in other girls. I said no, the others. They tried to run." Her hands tightened in her sweatshirt pocket. "That's why there's only me left." It made sense now. The fear, the messages, the control over the timing. Kiana hadn't just been hiding from Hall's family. She'd been hiding from a serving, or at least once serving, officer with the power to make people vanish without a trace. "I have his name," she said, glancing at Denise. "But if you print it before I tell you how to prove it, they'll shut it down. You've seen what they can do to a case. You've seen what they can do to people." "Then tell me," Denise urged. "Not yet. You need to get ready first. Once I say it, you won't be able to walk away, and they'll know you're coming for them." Kiana stood abruptly. "This is the last time we meet in public. Next time, it'll be somewhere they can't watch." She started toward the side exit, then turned back. "And Denise, stop staying in the same place twice. They're already following you." Before Denise could reply, she was gone, slipping into the night like a shadow. Denise drove straight to Navarro's apartment, waking him with a pounding on the door. She relayed everything Kiana had told her. Every word burned into memory. Navarro rubbed a hand over his face. "If she's telling the truth, this isn't just about corruption, it's organized trafficking, with law enforcement on the inside. And she's ready to give me a name," Denise said, "but only if we can protect her. That means she needs somewhere safe, outside their reach." Navarro nodded slowly. "I know a place, but once we move her, we go to war. You ready for that?" Denise didn't hesitate. "I was ready the second she sent me that first message." The safe house Navarro chose wasn't what Denise expected. From the outside, it looked like a neglected farmhouse on a back road miles from the city. The windows were grimy, the porch sagged, and the driveway was half swallowed by weeds. But once Navarro led her inside, the transformation was clear. Reinforced doors, blackout curtains, and the faint hum of a generator somewhere out back. Kiana was already there, sitting at the kitchen table. In daylight, Denise could see her clearly for the first time. She was thin, her face sharper than the yearbook photos, but her eyes, guarded, calculating, hadn't dulled. Navarro poured coffee for all three of them, then sat across from Kiana. "No one followed you here. This is secure. If you're going to talk, now's the time." Kiana wrapped her hands around the mug like she needed the heat to steady herself. She looked from Navarro to Denise. "You need to understand something before I say his name. Once you hear it, you'll know why nobody came for us." Denise leaned forward. "We're listening." Kiana took a slow breath. "His name is Captain Raymond Holt." The silence was immediate and absolute. Denise knew the name. Everybody in St. Clair County did. Holt wasn't just any cop. He had been the face of law enforcement for decades, decorated, respected, often quoted in the press as a voice for community safety. She'd interviewed him herself once, back when she was still new at the Metro Post. Navarro's expression darkened. "Holt? You're sure?" "I'm sure," Kiana said, her voice steady. "He was the one who picked us up that night. There wasn't a van or some random stranger. It was a patrol car. That's why we didn't run at first. We thought we were safe." Her hands tightened around the coffee mug. "He drove us across the river to Hall's house. He was there the first night and the second. And after that, every few weeks. He brought food sometimes, but mostly he came to check. To remind us we weren't getting out unless we did what they wanted." Denise could feel her pen digging into the paper as she took notes. "Tell me about that night, from the beginning." Kiana's gaze drifted somewhere far away. "It was hot. We left the party late. We were cutting down 15th Street when the patrol car pulled up. Holt got out, smiled, said there was trouble up ahead and he'd give us a ride home. We didn't even think to say no, but we didn't go home. He drove past our street, then onto the highway. When we asked where we were going, he said there'd been a shooting near our block and we needed to stay safe." Her voice caught, but she pushed on. "When we got to Hall's place, Marcus Sr. was waiting. Holt handed us over like it was nothing. That was the moment I knew we weren't going home." Navarro's tone was hard. "So Holt was the inside man. He kept local PD and county off the scent." Kiana nodded. "He told us once, laughing, that we were the quiet kind. Said no one would raise hell for 4 black girls from our part of town. And he was right. People forgot about us fast. My mom tried. She went to the cops every week at first. Then Holt started showing up at her door, telling her she was wasting her time, scaring her. Eventually, she stopped opening the door at all." Denise's stomach turned. "He made sure the families lost hope." "Not just hope," Kiana said. "He made sure they believed we were already dead. That way, no one would keep looking." Denise hesitated. "Why you? Why were you the one who made it out?" Kiana's eyes dropped to the table. "I got sick. Fever, weight loss. They thought I wasn't worth the trouble anymore. Hall's brother dropped me at a bus station one night with a bag of clothes and $200. Said if I ever told anyone, they'd find me and finish the job." She looked up again, her voice hardening. "I believed him, until now." Navarro leaned back, rubbing his temples. "This is explosive, but we can't just run it in the paper. If we go public now, Holt will have time to bury evidence and shut down anyone willing to talk. We need corroboration, witnesses, physical proof, anything that ties him to Hall." Denise glanced at Kiana. "Do you have anything? Anything that could prove he was there?" Kiana nodded slowly. "There's a storage unit in Hall's name, just outside Mill Creek. I've never been inside, but I saw Holt drop something off there once. Big duffel bag. He was nervous. If it's still there, that's your proof." Navarro made a note. "We'll need to get in without alerting anyone local. That means warrants. And a judge we can trust. I know a federal contact who owes me." Denise knew the stakes. Once Holt's name was on record, there would be no going back. Every cop loyal to him would close ranks. And if Hall's family had the kind of reach she suspected, there would be pressure from outside law enforcement too. But the truth was finally in her hands. She could see the shape of the story now. Not just a cold case, but a decades-long abuse of power shielded by badges, office titles, and silence. Kiana looked between them. Once you open that door, they'll come for me first. You need to be ready to move me before you publish. Navarro nodded. We will. Denise leaned forward, meeting Kiana's eyes. And when we do publish, they won't be able to touch you again, not without the whole world watching. As they talked through logistics, the storage unit, the federal contact, the next meeting point, Denise felt the undercurrent of something unspoken. Kiana had carried this for 13 years, and now she was trusting Denise to drag it into the light. It was more than just a story now. If Denise failed, Kiana would pay the price. And if she succeeded, the names of Alea, Shanice, Tamara, and Kiana would finally break free from the cold, gray list of unsolved. 2 days later, the sky over St. Louis was a flat steel gray, the kind that promised rain but didn't deliver it. Denise sat in Navarro's unmarked sedan, watching the front gate of a nondescript storage facility on the outskirts of Mill Creek. The place was quiet, only the occasional tenant pulling up to unload boxes or furniture. Navarro checked his watch, then the rearview mirror. Our federal guy's inside. Once he gives the signal, we move in. You keep that camera rolling no matter what. Denise's hand tightened around the small digital camera in her lap. If we find what Kiana says is in there, Navarro cut in. If we find it, this doesn't just take down Holt. It blows open every case he's ever touched. That's why we can't screw this up. A sharp knock on the window made Denise jump. It was the federal agent, plainclothes, mid-40s, the kind of man who looked like he could vanish in a crowd. He handed Navarro a set of bolt cutters. Unit 47, let's go. They moved quickly down the row of metal doors, the gravel crunching under their shoes. Navarro cut the lock in one swift motion and rolled the door up. The air inside was stale and faintly chemical. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls, but the center of the unit held a single, battered duffel bag. Navarro knelt, unzipped it, and immediately stopped. Denise crouched beside him, her stomach turning. Inside were bundles of photographs, hundreds of them, wrapped in rubber bands. The top one showed a girl Denise didn't recognize, standing in a corner with her hands tied in front of her. The background was unmistakable. The same floral bedspread from room 14. Navarro pulled out more. Different girls, different dates, some Polaroids, some cheap disposable camera shots. A ledger appeared halfway down the bag. Names, dates, payments. Some entries had initials next to them. M.H., R.H. Raymond Holt, Navarro muttered. Marcus Hall, this is it. In the bottom of the bag was a VHS tape in a plain black case. Navarro handed it to the agent. Chain of custody starts now. Get this to the lab. No copies floating around. The agent nodded, but not before Denise caught a glimpse of the label. A date. August 12th, 2003. The week after the girls vanished. Denise's pulse hammered. That's the night they were taken. By dawn the next morning, Navarro's contact had enough for a sealed federal warrant. Holt was arrested at his home before breakfast, still in a t-shirt and sweats. Hall was picked up the same morning at a golf course outside St. Louis. The charges, kidnapping, trafficking, conspiracy, obstruction, would take years to process in court. But for the first time, there were no quiet deals. No sudden retirements. Kiana was moved to a federal witness program, her location kept secret even from Denise. The last time they spoke, it was on a burner phone. You kept your word, she said softly. So did you, Denise replied. When the Metro Post ran Denise's story, it hit like a shockwave. The headline was simple. Captain Raymond Holt and Councilman Marcus Hall tied to disappearance of 4 girls. The photographs from the storage unit ran in black and white, cropped to preserve the victim's dignity but stark enough to make the reality impossible to ignore. In the days that followed, the phones at the paper didn't stop ringing. Other women, now grown, telling fragments of stories that sounded hauntingly similar. Public outrage poured across the city and into Mill Creek. Protesters stood outside the police department, demanding answers about how a man like Holt had kept his badge for decades. In the weeks after the arrests, the fallout spread. Several officers quietly resigned. The police chief announced an internal review, but Navarro told Denise the feds weren't going to let the department investigate itself. The Hall family's influence in Mill Creek collapsed almost overnight. Businesses that had been connected to their investments cut ties, and the last Hall-owned property was seized under federal asset forfeiture. But justice was imperfect. The bodies of Aaliyah, Shanice, and Tamara were never found. Holt refused to speak in custody. Hall's lawyers fought every charge, claiming the photos and ledger were fabrications. At the first pre-trial hearing, Denise sat in the gallery. Holt was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit, thinner than she remembered, but his eyes were as cold as the night she'd interviewed him years ago. For a moment, their eyes met. His look said what his lawyers wouldn't. "You got lucky." 2 months later, Denise received a letter without a return address. Inside was a single page, handwritten in careful block letters. "I can't go home, but I can live now. Tell them we weren't lost. Tell them they looked away." It was signed only with a K. Denise kept it folded in her notebook. When she wrote the final installment of the series, she ended it with words that echoed through every email and phone call she'd gotten from readers. They weren't lost because no one could find them. They were lost because too many chose not to look. And for 13 years, their silence was mistaken for absence. Now the truth speaks, and it will not be quiet again. The story won her awards, but that wasn't the point. The point was that the names, Aaliyah Jones, Shanice Ford, Tamara Green, and Kiana Morris, would no longer sit in the cold case file. They were here now, in ink, in history, undeniable. Some nights, Denise still thought about the first message. They lied about what happened to us. She thought about how close it had come to being just another cryptic line in her inbox, something she could have ignored. And she thought about the willow tree, the dirt under her nails, the box in her hands. She dug up the truth, but not without cost. Mill Creek would never forget what she'd done. Neither would she. Because the truth, once uncovered, doesn't just set you free. It stays with you. It watches. And sometimes it whispers. The trial stretched on for more than a year. Witnesses testified behind screens, their voices quivering through voice modulators. The ledger from the storage unit became a roadmap for prosecutors, connecting dates and names to missing person reports that had been cold for decades. The VHS tape, degraded but still clear enough, confirmed the worst. Denise was in court the day the verdicts came down. The room was packed. Reporters, families of victims, curious onlookers. Holt sat at the defense table in a pressed suit, as if the uniform had never been stripped from him. Hall slouched in his chair, whispering to his attorneys. The jury foreman read the verdicts in a voice that carried through the silent room. Guilty on all counts. For both of them. The families wept, some in relief, some in anguish at the reminder that this was as close to closure as they would ever get. Holt stared straight ahead, his expression unchanged. Hall shook his head like a man convinced the world had simply made a mistake. That night, Denise got a call from a number she didn't recognize. She answered, and Kiana's voice, faint, almost swallowed by static, came through. "They can't touch me now," she said. "But I'm not coming back. Not to the city, not to that neighborhood. There's nothing there for me anymore." "I understand," Denise said. "No, you don't. They taught me to disappear, and I'm good at it. I don't want anyone to know where I am, but I wanted you to know I'm not scared anymore." There was a long pause before she added, "Don't forget the others. People forget fast." "I won't," Denise promised. The line went dead. Within weeks, the media cycle shifted. Other crimes took the headlines. Other tragedies filled the airwaves. But Denise kept the box from the willow tree on a high shelf in her apartment, not as a trophy, as a warning. The photographs stayed wrapped, the ledger closed. She didn't need to look at them again to remember every detail, the smell of the storage unit, the brittle sound of the rubber bands snapping, the way Navarro's face had gone hard when he saw the badge in that first photo. Mill Creek stayed quiet. No one from the town reached out to her, not even to threaten her. That silence was its own kind of statement, a reminder that the people who'd once looked away were still there, and they still remembered who had made them see. On the anniversary of the girl's disappearance, Denise drove to the corner of Mississippi Avenue and 15th Street. The block had changed, new paint, fewer boarded windows. But it still felt heavy. She brought 4 small candles, placing each one on the sidewalk. Aaliyah Jones, Shanice Ford, Tamara Green, Kiana Morris. She lit them one by one, whispering each name under her breath. People walked past without stopping. Cars rolled by without slowing down. Denise didn't care. The ritual wasn't for them. That night, she filed one last update for the Metro Post. It was short, only a few paragraphs, and she ended it with the same words she'd written in her notebook the day she first drove to Mill Creek. They weren't lost because no one could find them. They were lost because too many chose not to look. It wasn't a conclusion. It was a reminder. Months later, a package arrived at the Metro Post newsroom addressed only to Denise. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed the willow tree taken from a distance. The branches swayed, the grass at its base wild and overgrown. There was no note, no signature, only a faint reflection in the photo's corner. A woman's face, just enough to know it was Kiana. It was the kind of photograph that could mean anything. A goodbye, a promise, or a warning. Denise slid it into her notebook, between the first flyer photo and the last court clipping. She didn't show it to Navarro. She didn't tell anyone. Some things weren't meant for the public. And that's where the story leaves us. With 4 names that will never fade from the record, a network of silence cracked open but not erased, and a survivor who learned to vanish in a world that made her disappear once already. Because in the end, this was never about a single night in 2003. It was about the years that followed, when people who could have acted didn't, when the truth lived in plain sight, hidden only by the choice not to see, a long-buried horror finally coming to light. And the darker knowledge that there are still shadows deep enough to hide in. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe some truths should never stay buried, don't forget to subscribe for more investigations and real cases that refuse to be forgotten.